Number 10. Hulk smash? X-Men? This happened during World War Hulk. Hulk had been sent to Sakaar and believed that the Illuminati were not only responsible for sending him off-world, but also for destroying the planet that he had made his new home and his future family there as well. Coming back to Earth and pissed, he began to hunt down all members of the Illuminati, including those who weren't even at the meeting. Enter Charles Xavier. While Charles was not one of the members to condemn the Hulk as he was not in attendance, Hulk still wanted to know what Charles would have voted had he been there. Charles told him the truth, that he also would have voted to send Hulk off-world. Hulk wanted to hold Charles accountable for what he saw as his potential crimes, since, Charles didn't actually vote, but before he could take him away, the X-Men stepped in to defend the professor. Hulk then began to beat down any and all mutants or allies who would stand in his way. It was a slaughter. All this despite the fact that Charles wasn't even there, and these mutants really didn't have a say in the matter of Hulk being sent off-world to begin with. In the end, Hulk was shamed into stopping his attack and leaving Xavier be by the mutant Mercury. Thank goodness. Number 9. Schism. Schism isn't necessarily a bad idea on paper, but it was one of the darkest moments in X-Men history, so in a way it was the worst for the mutants themselves, in terms of in-canon, as opposed to, us readers. What went down here? Well, Cyclops and Wolverine fought and created a huge split down the middle between mutant kind, especially mutant students, as each had their own beliefs when it came to as how best to shape these young minds. What might seem odd about Schism is that it was about a divide between Psych and Wolvie, who are not really known for being super friendly anyways, due to their infighting about, who should get a date Jean Grey. However, it should also be noted that Cyclops and Wolverine, despite both loving Jean, are actually considered to be pretty close and are good friends. That is until they get into a disagreement about how best to teach young mutants. Like I said, they've gotten into a lot of disagreements before that, but this one was pretty big. Wolverine thinks that they should be treated as kids, and Cyclops thinks they should be trained as soldiers. What makes it worse is just as a Sentinel attacks the mutant island of Utopia, Cyclops and Wolverine decided to fight one another over the differentiating standpoints as opposed to dealing with the Sentinels, which is, I know you guys are having a fight, but like, a Sentinel's attacking? I feel like we should deal with that first. Number 8. Cyclops recruits X-23 for X-Force. X-Force is a team that is sometimes referred to as the X-Men Black Ops team. They go in and do the jobs that others are not willing to do. The more shady and morally questionable heroic stuff. X-Force originally started as Cable's team that went around dealing with situations and taking out people that basically Cable thought needed to be handled. But from there would evolve into a secret X-Men team that handled assassinations and less desirable jobs. At one point, it's Cyclops who puts the team together during the mutants' time on Utopia. He appoints Wolverine the leader, but also puts X-23 on the team against Logan's wishes. This is because X-23, Laura Kinney, has only known killing pretty much her whole life. She was made to be a weapon, and Logan wanted her to have a say moving forward in what she did with her life. He didn't want her to have to feel like she always had to be a weapon. She could be more than that. But Cyclops feels she's too useful to not have on the team. Needless to say, it was not a good look for Psych, and Logan was pretty pissed. Number 7. The first live-action Juggernaut. While the version of Juggernaut from the Deadpool franchise appears relentless in a really great way, the first attempt at the character on screen was not so great. Even the actor that played Juggernaut in the Fox X-Men franchise, Vinnie Jones, appearing in X-Men The Last Stand, supposedly claimed he was even disappointed with the portrayal as well. The problem with this version of Juggy was that he wasn't really intimidating enough. Also, that outfit. I don't think it works great on camera. If it weren't for the Juggernaut's displays of easily smashing through walls, I feel like we'd have a hard time recognizing him here, even with him clearly stating who he is to the audience while he's in pursuit of Kitty Pryde. Number 6. Inhumans vs. X-Men. Possibly one of the weirdest storylines we've ever gotten, especially as Inhumans were kind of attempted to be utilized before in the comics to be like a backup to the X-Men. Not saying I don't love the Inhumans, by the way, but after Marvel sold the rights of the X-Men to Fox, they basically made an attempt to kind of catapult the Inhumans into popularity, and that really just didn't work out too well. The Inhumans were made by the Kree and were modified humans who basically get powers through a process called Terrigenesis, where they're exposed to Terrigen mists. They usually keep to themselves, so to have them fight any mutant group feels kind of weird straight out of the gate. The reasoning between them and the X-Men having beef beef? Well, it turns out that apparently Terrigen mists are like poison to mutant kind, and despite the Inhumans attempting to work things out and come to some kind of peaceful resolution when mutant kind were accidentally hurt by mists released on Earth because they actually felt pretty bad about it, the two groups ended up in a war. What makes it even worse is that the catalyst for this war, the dramatic death of Cyclops at the hands, or rather the voice, of Black Bolt, is revealed to have been staged by Emma Frost to give mutants a reason to fight back against a group that never really wanted to fight to begin with. So what are we even talking about here? Number 5. Cyclops and Emma Frost make out on Jean Grey's grave. Oh boy. Yeah, there are a lot of things that have not been great when it comes to Cyclops' history. Sorry Cyclops, I love you Scott, but you do some questionable things, man. I mean, he's done a lot of good things, but he's also been part of some of the biggest scandals in all of mutant history. Case in point, his psychic affair with Emma Frost, and following that, his making out on Jean's grave with Emma after Jean had died. Wolverine certainly was not impressed with any of this. While many still ship and love Cyclops and Emma together, even many of the fans of the couple would agree it was a pretty weird moment. However, Jean's ghost gave the couple her blessing, so I guess we're just supposed to be cool with it. I mean, I guess if Jean's ghost is fine with it, then we're just supposed to be like, yeah, alright, why not? Make out on that grave. You guys are in love. It's cool. Number 4. Professor X and Jean Grey. In particular, Professor X's initial feelings about Jean back in the Stan Lee, Jack Kirby days of the X-Men. We all know that Cyclops, aka Scott Summers, has always had a thing for Jean, but when it comes to the classic X-Men team, he actually wasn't the only one. In fact, pretty much everyone was head over heels for Jean at one point. Maybe except Bobby, who back in the day did like to flirt, but mainly was in love with ice cream. I mean, Bobby was the youngest of the bunch, and even me, not necessarily being the youngest of any bunch, I still love ice cream, so fair enough Bobby, you eat that ice cream. Both Angel and Beast also seem to hold a bit of a flame for the lone female member of the X-Men team at that time, with Angel actually being pretty close at times to winning Jean's heart. But that's not where it ended. Even Charles Xavier, Jean's mentor and teacher, was apparently in love with her? Why is this so bad? While at the time the X-Men came across as more young adults at times than teenagers, in retrospect it would be established that Charles, as a grown man, had come to Jean's aid when her powers first manifested and shielded her from them with mental blocks to protect her from basically the sheer power that would otherwise probably have destroyed her. So she was maybe 8 or 10 I think when this happened, and he was an adult? Okay. Add in the fact that even back in the 60s run, Charles was her professor and Jean was his student, and the fact that Professor X chiefly blamed his lack of ability to walk as a reason why he couldn't, nay shouldn't, be with Jean, and it's all kinda weird and pretty gross. Look, Charles, you don't have to walk for people to love you, but also don't have crushes on your students, it's weird. Number 3. Archangel and Husk. One of the strangest relationships to have ever existed in the X-Books. One of. Or at the very least, one of the most controversial was the one between Archangel and Husk. Why was it considered so weird? Well, Angel was one of the first ever X-Men on the original team back in the 60s. Now, time works weird in comics, I'll grant you that, but Husk was known to be the younger sister of Cannonball, who himself was a much later addition to the X-Men, first appearing almost 20 years after Angel on the New Mutants team in 1982. And Husk, Paige Guthrie, his younger sister, appeared 2 years later in 1984. She was believed to be in her late teens or maybe her early 20s, while Angel, although somewhat ageless, would likely be in his 30s at least, if not older, because yeah, he was around in the 60s, so we gotta do some fixing to make that make sense. And it was implied that he was quite a bit older throughout their relationship as well, just in the comics in the context of the relationship and what they would say to each other. Add in the fact that these two got busy in the sky above the Guthrie family home, and yeah, you can see why this feels really problematic and weird. Number 2. X-Men Gold controversy. Oh boy, the X-Men Gold controversy. X-Men Gold was actually a series that many X-Men fans were really excited for at the time. It promised a fresh, new take on X-Men the fans were craving, but when it came out, the first issue's release was swept up in a whirlwind of controversy in regards to its first printing. This was because the artist, Ardian Syaf, who was said to have hidden political symbolism in the issue, which directly related to a protest in Indonesia against the Christian governor of Jakarta, known as AHOK. Overall, the protest was considered to be quite conservative in regards to political sides, and those protesting AHawk wanted him jailed for being a blasphemer when he referred to a passage in the Quran during his campaign. Now, he apologized for doing so, but people were still really angry about it, and Saif was supposedly among those at the protest and decided to include the political and religiously charged numbers in the first issue of the book, which are also said to stand for a passage that is interpreted in Indonesia speaking against accepting Jews or Christians as Muslim leaders. So even though apparently there were a lot of things that were misconstrued with all of that, it still was just not great. It's not great. Number 1. Genoshan Mutant Massacre. The history of Genosha has pretty much been tumultuous and widely awful since the start. The island nation prospered for most of its history thanks to mutants who were born there and once identified had their free will stripped of them, all their rights taken away, and were basically used as free laborers for the benefit of the nation, no longer being considered citizens but the property of the Genoshan government once they were identified as mutants. Pretty terrible stuff. Eventually, the mutants on the island would rise up with some help, but even after that, it would not be easy to set things right. There was a lot of fighting that happened on Genosha even after the mutants were kind of trying to get their rights back. At one point, Magneto got ownership of the island nation and attempted to turn it into a nation for mutant kind, a place mutants could call their own, reclaiming it and turning it into a little slice of paradise for them. An attempt at what we have kind of with Krakoa today. Hopefully it ends better for Krakoa though. For Genosha, millions of mutants were murdered on the island after it was attacked by Cassandra Nova's Wild Sentinels. It was a brutal and dark moment in mutant history, with the island being put on quarantine so that even those who did survive and tried to get away were ordered to be shot on sight. A lot of people like to focus on House of M and M-Day, but Genosha was a mass extinction mutant event, and it was a really brutal attack. Number 10. The Fate of SQUID-BOY. SQUID-BOY and his friendship with Juggernaut was one of the redeeming elements of Chuck Austin's run on the X-Men, which is pretty widely disliked among fans of the X-Men. Austin's run is also the one that featured the relationship which was highly controversial between Husk and Angel. However, one of the things that was pretty cool about his run was how Juggernaut was brought into the book and somewhat redeemed. Juggernaut even befriended Sammy, known as SQUID-BOY, a young mutant who was ridiculed at school for his appearance and came to join the Xavier Institute. SQUID-BOY would save Juggernaut's life, and the two would become friends, with Kane even becoming like a father to SQUID-BOY, whose own father mistreated him as Kane's once had. Despite them both protecting one another, at one point SQUID-BOY stumbles upon a meeting that Juggernaut is attending with the Brotherhood of Evil Mutants. Gasp. Tragically, SQUID-BOY did not know that Juggernaut was acting as a double agent for the X-Men. Causing a scene and accusing Juggernaut of being a traitor, Black Tom Cassidy reacted by killing the young mutant. What an end to that initially sweet and uplifting story. Number 9. Beast's not so subtle disguise. At one point, the X-Men get kidnapped and brainwashed by Mesmero, forced to join the circus. At the time, Hank wasn't even really with the X-Men, but was instead a member of the Avengers. But when he answers a call from the mutants and finds the X-Mansion deserted, he still of course looks for his fellow friends and former and future comrades. While searching, Beast decides to adopt a disguise. This is already after Beast is covered in bright blue fur, so what disguise does he go for? Trench coat and a hat. You got it. Even stranger, for the most part, his disguise actually works. It's only after his hat is removed that even the brainwashed X-Men seem to realize that there's something weird going on with his appearance. Don't worry though, despite the fact that Hank is kinda awful at disguises in this story, he's still a brilliant and dexterous fellow who is able to help save the X-Men in the end. Number 8. Avengers vs. X-Men. Avengers vs. X-Men pitted two superhero groups, both known for doing massive good and saving the world on multiple, countless occasions really, against one another. How do you even make these two groups fight one another? Enter the Phoenix Force. Avengers and X-Men decide to take one another on because they disagree on what to do with the Phoenix Force, which is headed to Earth to merge with its current ideal host, Hope Summers, the mutant messiah. The X-Men want to protect Hope but also think the Phoenix could be useful, while the Avengers think the cosmic power is too dangerous and should be destroyed. All in all, Avengers vs. X-Men created a lot of problems, especially for the X-Men going forward. It also is a big part of the later split between Storm and Black Panther, who were actually married at the time. While the X-Men and mutant kind were at least mostly united in this front, although, Wolverine had some conflicting feelings of his own about it, Avengers vs. X-Men was also considered to be one of the greatest clashing of ideals since the first Civil War event from 2006. Number 7. Fox. Fox was one of the weirdest X-Men to have never really existed, and also was pretty creepy considering the moves she put on Gambit. Fox Fox attempted to seduce Gambit away from Rogue at a time when the couple were having some pretty intense intimacy problems. I mean, Rogue and Gambit have had intimacy problems physically for years in the comics, but I'm talking about intimacy on really all levels, including emotional intimacy. Emma Frost at the time was trying to provide a sort of couples counseling for them and offer them a free space psychically for them to connect romantically in ways they couldn't in the physical world at that time. Fox played on Gambit's struggles, flirting with him and offering herself physically to him. One, this was pretty messed up as Fox was actually a mutant student of his, and two, it was really messed up because it was later revealed that Fox actually wasn't a student at all, didn't really exist, but was actually Rogue's adoptive mother Mystique in disguise, who didn't believe that Gambit was good enough for her daughter and later claimed to have been testing Gambit. Number 6. Cyclops kills Professor X. Now granted, this also happened as a result of the Avengers vs. X-Men story arc. Cyclops ended up killing Professor X because he was possessed by the Phoenix Force and ultimately had so much power with him that it basically corrupted him. But this was also not a great time for Professor X in comic book history, so even if you disagree with Cyclops' actions here, and I think most people do, I think you can at least understand why this happened. This was following a time where many dark truths about Xavier and his lies to the X-Men were unearthed. Among them was the sentience of the Danger Room, itself an AI cyborg mutant, as well as the revelation in Deadly Genesis that Xavier had sent Moira McTaggart's mutant team into Krakoa only for them to perish. Quote-unquote perish. A truth which Vulcan forced the professor to confess. Professor X was on a path of redemption at the time of his death at the hands, or rather optic blasts, of Cyclops, but he was still overshadowed by a pretty dark time in his own history. Number 5. Meet Daddy Nightcrawler. Probably one of the weirdest storylines we have ever had in comics happens to be one where we learned about the truth behind who Nightcrawler's father was. Did we need to know this? Did we really care about this? I mean, Kurt already had an adoptive family who are admittedly pretty cool, and he's got Mystique for a mom, which might not be as cool in terms of like Mystique being a good mom, but it's definitely interesting. But we also, I guess, had to give him a dad to help explain even more the way Nightcrawler looks and his powers. In a storyline where demonic mutants known as Neopham were pitted against angelic mutants known as Cheophim, implying that mutants are related to both heaven and hell, or at least some of them are, we learned that Azazel is a powerful, satanic-like demonic being who was actually Nightcrawler's father, and had only sired him in an attempt to free himself and his fellow Neopham from the Brimstone dimension where they were trapped. Number 4. Necrosha. The massacre at Genosha, which we talked about on part 1, was really bad. But even worse, it also paved the way for another tragic event when Necrosha happened. Tragic, scary, Necrosha's a lot of things. Necrosha was when Selene of the Externals, not to be confused with Marvel's Eternals, who are a totally different thing, decided to make her home base the devastated Genosha. Selene ended up taking control of all the dead left on Genosha, resurrecting them, and utilizing them as an undead army to attack the new mutant island of Utopia. Yeah, it was pretty bad. Not only does Selene seek to get revenge on the X-Men either, and also conquer Utopia, but her plan here is to basically become a bona fide goddess who would be pretty dangerous and scary indeed. Number 3. Inferno from 2021. During the most recent Inferno event, a lot of truths were unearthed about the true allegiances of those who came together to create Krakoa, and just exactly who was behind the whole mutant island paradise. Now, we already knew that story, but not all mutants, in fact not many mutants, did. The truth was that the idea of what Krakoa is was founded by Magneto and Professor X, as well as their ally and friend Moira McTaggart, who we recently found out during the House of X series was actually a mutant. Moira claimed she wanted to help her fellow mutants, but in reality she planned to actually end mutant kind, which is what's revealed in Inferno. But instead of destroying them, she wanted to disguise her destruction in the guise of a mutant paradise, kind of giving them like one last hurrah as they would eventually die out, as per her plan. During Inferno, Moira's betrayal was brought to light, and she was exiled from Krakoa. Number 2. Mutant Massacre. Now sometimes referred to as the Morlock Massacre, but back in the day it was simply known as the Mutant Massacre. This was before massive mutant attacks like Genosha ever happened, which is also what made this so much more shocking and horrible at the time. Although it happened on a smaller scale, the Mutant Massacre happened when Mr. Sinister in essence ordered the Morlocks be eradicated. He sent his team of marauders to handle them and attack, killing many who lived down in the sewers. It was, as it is called, a mutant massacre. For those unfamiliar, the Morlocks are less pretty mutants, basically. Ones who have dramatic physical mutations, which often make it impossible for them to walk among humans on the surface world, at least without going unnoticed. So they tend to stick to their own kind and the sewers. Think the sewer mutants from Futurama. It's kind of what they're like. Morlocks, as such, sometimes are considered more antagonistic mutants who resent the mutants sometimes who are able to walk freely among men. Now, not all Morlocks are like that, and in reality, for the most part, they're actually peaceful and innocent folks who have been even more ostracized and rejected from the world than most other mutants. So they definitely didn't deserve to be massacred. It was really awful. Number 1. M-Day. M-Day has to have been one of the worst moments in mutant history. Although I actually gave Genosha the top spot on my part 1 of this list, that's because, I pretty much always talk about M-Day, we don't usually talk about Genosha, and I wanted to save that for a potential part 2, which I figured was coming, and here it is. Decimation is by far one of the worst things to have ever happened to mutant kind. Genosha simply doesn't get enough acknowledgement because it ended up being overshadowed by the devastation of M-Day, which happened only a few years later, with M-Day happening in 2005 and the massacre at Genosha happening in 2001. M-Day happened as a result of Scarlet Witch striking out at mutant kind after the events of House of M, where she attempted to create a reality where many heroes were happy, but after learning of its falseness, was once again rejected by all those she had basically tried to help. Namely though, Wanda was striking out at her then to be believed father, Magneto, who she claimed loved mutant kind more than he did his own family. Wanda said the words "no more mutants," and with that small utterance, depowered or destroyed millions of mutants the world over.
Kicking off the list at number 10. Juggernaut. Cain Marko made his first comic book appearance in X-Men issue 12, when Cain and Charles Xavier were serving together in the same unit, but when Cain was under fire, he ran off to take cover in a nearby cave. The cave was actually home to the lost temple of Cyttorak. So Cain grabbed this glowing ruby from the lap of an idol. Apparently he's never seen an Indiana Jones movie. He read the inscription. Apparently he's never seen a horror movie. And he possessed the power of the Crimson Bands of Cyttorak, becoming a human Juggernaut. Then an explosion went off, and then Cain the Juggernaut was now trapped under the rubble, and Xavier just took off. So after Cain dug himself out, he destroyed an entire village, with the previous man who had held the Juggernaut mantle, Jin Taiko, being destroyed as well. Now at one point he joined the X-Men and accepted Xavier's offer to live at the Xavier's school. After a young boy he befriended named Sammy meets his fate, Cain embraces the Cyttorak energies once again and went back to his villain ways. Number 9. Mystique. Raven Darkholme made her first comic book debut in Miss Marvel issue 16 back in 1978, so she's been around for quite a while, although most of her history is quite secretive. Her powers are quite interesting and first came to be when she was around 12 years old. Now one of those powers being of course that she can metamorph. So she can shapeshift into literally anybody, doesn't matter what size, age, gender, whatever the case. She's so good at shapeshifting and becoming somebody else that she can even copy your retina patterns and of course your fingerprints. So she can definitely get into your phone in numerous ways. She constantly betrays the X-Men. She's so flippy floppy. She joins the team for selfish reasons and then she leaves all over again. It's part of the thing. Number 8. Colossus. Making his first debut in Giant Size X-Men issue 1, Colossus grew up in Russia with his brother Miko and sister Alina, and when a runaway tractor was about to take out Alina, he saved her life with his powers. And then of course that got the attention of Charles Xavier. So he joined Charles in his school, and then when the legacy virus took the life of Alina, that plus the fact that he was stuck in this giant metal mode, stuck in the X-Men mansion, it was his mental breaking point. He tipped to the dark side. He left and figured the best place to be was with the Acolytes, with Magneto and Avalon. Number 7. Wolverine. Wolverine has had a pretty crazy past, so it's no surprise that he's gone down a few dark roads in his time. In the movie Logan, for example, we see two Wolverines battle it out, and it's so gory and so wonderful. But in the comic Age of Apocalypse, Logan goes from being an X-Men to the Horseman of Death. Yeah, Apocalypse actually had Wolverine square up against Sabretooth in order to see who becomes this new Horseman. Wolverine came out on top, and Apocalypse restored the adamantium to his skeleton. Upgrade time, let's do it. And to make matters worse, Apocalypse replaced Wolverine with a scroll so the X-Men wouldn't notice. Now of course there's many more X-Men who have become Horsemen of the Apocalypse, such as number 6, Gambit. Making his first appearance in Uncanny X-Men 266, Remy LeBeau was a mutant child who was kidnapped from the hospital by members of the New Orleans Thieves Guild. So off the bat, not a happy start to his life. They referred to him as the White Devil. So before he joined the X-Men, he had a pretty shady past, and after he had become a member, it was revealed that before he had worked for Mr. Sinister, and Gambit was actually the one who was responsible for putting the Marauders into the New York sewers where the mutant massacre happened. So, okay. He was also one of Apocalypse's 4 horsemen, like I said previously. He took the place of the horseman Death, and he even refused any sedation during this process in order to make sure Apocalypse doesn't toy with his mind. What a badass. Dude's hardcore. His original plan during this was to keep an eye on Apocalypse from the inside, but the transformation did alter his intentions as well. He ended up rescuing his old self when he remembered his love for Rogue, and he claimed he was both Death and Gambit at the same time. What a troubled man. Number 5, Bishop. Lucas Bishop. He is a time traveler from a dystopian future, and his goal was to travel back in time to the past in order to stop an unknown traitor amongst the X-Men. Interesting, very interesting. So he's come from that dark future to change it. Sounds like a good way to mix things up, that's for sure. Now this was when most of the mutant population is depowered by the Scarlet Witch. Then the child Hope was born, the first mutant born since. Well, it turns out that this kid is the reason Bishop is going back. See, that kid would end up taking millions of lives in the 6-second war. So Bishop tries to take out the child, which makes him the traitor all along. Time travel hurts my head, oh my god. So Cable, another time traveler from a different future, protects Hope. Bishop fails at taking out Hope, but he does take down Cable, creating a new future where Cable is remembered as a hero for protecting the child, and Bishop was remembered as the villain. That's tragic and also very confusing. Number 4, Archangel. Warren Worthington III. He started out as the accustomed hero known as the Avenging Angel. And then once Xavier got his attention, he recruited him as the 3rd of the 5 founding members of the X-Men, alongside Cyclops, Iceman, Beast, and Marvel Girl. He developed a pair of feathered wings that grew out of his back, giving him the ability, of course, to fly. He became a member of X-Factor alongside other X-Men, but he lost his wings thanks to Cameron Hodge. See, Apocalypse saw this and he took advantage of the hero. He brainwashed him and turned him into Archangel, the first horseman of death in the comics. He eventually broke free of Apocalypse's control, but over the years he would flip-flop back and forth into the evil hands of Apocalypse. He at one point actually had almost replaced Apocalypse after his death. Yeah, he's a force you do not want to mess with. Number 3, Cyclops. Scott Summers has been a leader of the X-Men since the beginning. He carries the knowledge that Xavier gifted him when he was a teenager. He was always struggling to control his powers growing up, and his history is pretty tragic. So when Scott and Emma became the new co-headmasters of the school, Cyclops led the X-Men, and he was doing a pretty good job. He was working to destroy this negative image that the public gave the X-Men. And as time went on, the X-Men name was being tarnished, so he thought it was best to separate mutants from humanity. Yeah, he thought he'd separate them and then rule the mutants on an island nation known as Utopia. Magneto even gives him props for uniting all the mutants. I mean, this is a big deal for him. This starts going south in the Schism storyline, where Cyclops sends out child soldiers on these assassination missions. He has the mindset that mutants need to train to be soldiers rather than students, but they're like 12 years old, so it's like, okay. Eventually the team gets divided and Scott ends up taking on the powers of the Phoenix Force, fighting the Avengers and taking out Xavier, resulting in him being imprisoned. Number 2, Magneto. Making his first appearance in X-Men 1 back in 1963, Magneto is a mutant with the ability to generate and control magnetic fields. He's a master of magnetism. He was a close friend with Professor X, but of course they came to a disagreement over the idea that humans and mutants could coexist peacefully. Like I just mentioned, he was a fan of when they got divided. He gave Scott Summers props for doing this, so he's clearly on board with this idea. And obviously, his horrible childhood makes a fair point for said argument. He always believed that mutants were superior to humans. He was the one who created the Brotherhood of Mutants and the Acolytes. He worked with the X-Men before. See, when Professor X needed to leave Earth, Magneto stepped in to take his place and teach his students how to use their powers. After this, he became a hero in a way. He was guiding these new mutants. But again, he's one of those villains that constantly flips back and forth in the comics, and I'm really hoping he somehow is the one responsible for all this madness in WandaVision. After all, now that Quicksilver is somehow in the picture from the Fox universe, one can only hope we'll see some more X-Men, and one can only wish that Magneto will come through and maybe give his daughter a little talking to. And finally, number 1, Jean Grey. The Dark Phoenix, of course, she is number 1. Jean Grey is an Omega level mutant born with telekinetic and telepathic powers. She was also one of the OG members of the X-Men. Now, seeing the potential in Jean's strength, the Phoenix Force attached itself to her while she was in danger during a space mission with the Fantastic Four. It's X-Men 101. Like literally, the issue is X-Men 101. Dark Phoenix has now entered the chat. Uh-oh. So much power. Okay, this dark, powerful cosmic force started to change her for the worse. She ended up destroying a solar system that, you know, kind of killed billions. And then she took her own life in order to keep the universe safe. Now, a few years later, it was revealed that it wasn't actually the Jean Grey that had died. No, just the Phoenix as a separate entity that had taken over her mind and all that jazz. The Phoenix Saga is one of the biggest transformations to an X-Men member, and we even got to see all this go down on screen. Now, of course, we'd have to put her at number 1. Number 10, Thunderbird. AKA John Proudstar, Thunderbird made his comic book debut in Giant Size X-Men issue 1, and during his childhood on the Apache Reservation in Camp Verde, Arizona, John wasn't like the other kids on the reservation. He grew up extremely strong, and he became an athlete, and at just the age of 20, his mutant powers manifested when he wrestled a charging bison with his bare hands. That's a lot of strength. Now, this earned him fame on the reservation, so much so that Charles Xavier caught wind of the young man through Cerebro and invited him to join the X-Men. The first mission John took was actually the rescue of the original X-Men from Krakoa. Xavier then gave him the nickname Thunderbird. Now, Apocalypse experimented on Thunderbird and transformed him into the Horseman of War at one point. Now, fortunately, this didn't last forever as he broke free of Apocalypse's mind control and began getting his life back together. You can find all of this in Exiles issue 1. Number 9, Wither. Making his first appearance in New Mutants Volume 2, Issue 3, Wither, aka Kevin Ford, grew up thinking he was cursed, or he was the most unlucky person on the planet. His mutant powers started to manifest, and he noticed it first in his plants and then on his clothes. See, his plants would die and his clothes would start to fade away. They would start to decay, almost wither away. Now we get it. Now, his father tried to calm him down once he realized this, but coming into contact with Kevin, well, you could have guessed what happens. He was soon discovered and was invited to join Xavier's Institute to learn how to control his wild powers of organic decay. He got close with Wallflower, aka Lori Collins, but in the House of M storyline, he touched her arm and crippled her. He ran away hurt and was soon met by Selene, the Black Queen, and she invited Wither to join her circle, and he gladly accepted. Number 8. Polaris. She's a powerful mutant who came to control magnetism, and she made her first appearance in X-Men 49 as Lorna Dane. But then in issue 97, she was Polaris. Cerebro identified her as a mutant when she stepped out of the shower and had green hair. So Iceman had a crush on her when she was part of the team, but she was in love with Havoc. Her powers are of course similar to Magneto's, but she lost them after the M-Day event as well. So when Apocalypse came into the picture, he also restored her powers as she was deemed the Horseman Pestilence. She was saved by her lover man Havoc and was also healed of Apocalypse's mind control. So again, didn't last too long, but definitely did see enough dark days. Number 7, GLOB Herman. GLOB Herman, aka Robert Herman, made his debut in New X-Men issue 117, and he grew up with a father who despised mutants a lot. So already we're off to a promising start. So when GLOB mutated, his father was just not having it. So much so that his mother drove out GLOB to Westchester and left him for Professor X. See, this mutation was interesting. His skin was this transparent living wax, which he's able to maintain being on fire, which is kind of cool. He runs with the New Mutants now, but at one point he did join the Omega Gang, led by Kid Omega, and they made their own stand for mutant rights. See, GLOB wasn't a fan of the school, and he also had a grudge by the way that his father treated him. So he had a pretty harsh take on how to treat humans. Poor GLOB, I mean, he had a rough childhood, not exactly his fault here at all. Number 6, Kid Omega. Okay, that guy that I just mentioned, of course, I'll fill you in a little bit on him as well and what gang that he was a part of. Quintavious Quinton Quirinius made his first appearance in X-Men issue 134, and he has been described as one of the most powerful telepaths, one of the most strongest mutants ever besides Jean Grey. He was once the host of the Phoenix Force as well, so that should give you any indication. He was one of Xavier's prized pupils until he put together the Omega Gang, which was a gang that takes out humans for the crimes they committed against mutants. He even went to a tattoo shop to get him and the gang tattoos of an Omega symbol to put over top of the X-Men symbol. So they weren't playing around here. I mean, at least try wash off tattoos first. I mean, give it some thought, you know, those things are forever. Number 5, Banshee. Making his first appearance in X-Men issue 28, Sean Cassidy was born as the heir to the castle and estate of Cassidy Keep in Ireland. Professor Xavier asked him to join the X-Men at the same time as Thunderbird, and they both stayed as members of the new X-Men. He went on to train the new generation of X-Men and Generation X, but was killed during Deadly Genesis when he tried to stop the Blackbird from crashing when it was taken over. Banshee remained one of the unliving until the Apocalypse twins resurrected him using the Death Seed, thus becoming the Horseman of Death himself. himself. Later on, he ended up in the custody of the X-Men when Beast thought it was best to put him in a coma until the healing of Death Seed energy is complete. Number 4. Jubilee. Making her first appearance in Uncanny X-Men issue 244, Jubilee, aka Jubilation Lee, first discovered her mutant powers of generating this blinding and explosive blast from her hands. She was discovered by Dazzler, Cyclops, Rogue, and Storm during a rescue at the mall. And when she followed the women through the portal, she ended up at the X-Men's temporary base in the Australian outback. So she stayed there hiding, and then when the Reavers captured Wolverine and took over their base, she borrowed the X-Men's clothes and made a suit for herself. So she went and rescued Wolverine and aided him back to health. She's already an X-Men, look at that, just like that. So Jubilee and Wolverine ended up becoming a good pair, working missions together, and then a vampire ended up infecting the area of Union Square and Curse of the Mutants, and Jubilee, being caught in the path of this infection, ended up becoming a vampire herself. And in perfect harmony, she in the story ends up infecting Wolverine during her bloodthirsty time. And he was coming back to rescue her as well when it all happened. She's kept in a holding cell where Wolverine is really the only X-Men saying that they should keep her alive. So rough times, rough times. Number 3, Tattoo. AKA Christine Korn, she made her first comic book debut in New X-Men issue 126. She's a student of the Xavier Institute, and she's known as Tattoo, well, because her mutation allows her to display messages or designs on her skin. And if that's not cool enough, she can phase through matter. So, coolest mutant ever, okay? She is also one of the Omega Gang members, and one time, her and the other members, led by Quentin Quire, started a riot at Xavier Institute during opening day celebrations. So Tattoo actually phased her hand into Cyclops' head, and then told him that if she became solid, he wouldn't survive to see the end of it. But then, Emma Frost reverted the trick by turning into Diamond, and then putting her hand into Tattoo's head to prevent her from taking out Cyclops. What a confusing sight to see. Superheroes are so cool. And at one point, she also attacked Beast and Wolverine, but she was being controlled by Cassandra Nova, so. Number 2, Rachel Summers. She's the daughter of Scott Summers and Jean Grey in an alternate universe on Earth 811, and she makes her first appearance in X-Men 141, the Days of Future Past story. So she was born from the Phoenix Force merging with Jean, so she got the abilities of a telepath and of a telekinetic. She was raised at Xavier's School for Gifted Youngsters when she met Franklin Richards and became really close. Now one day the school was attacked by federal troops, and she was one of the only survivors. She was taken in by the crazy Ahab, where she was brainwashed and became the mutant Hound, where she used her psionic powers to hunt down other mutants. Her time as this horrible mutant hunter weighed heavy on her conscience afterwards. I mean, she even got her face marked up by these guys. It was just an all bad situation. And finally, number 1, Pyro. Pyro was once a student at the Xavier School for Gifted Youngsters, and in X2, we see him hanging out with Iceman and Rogue. By the end of the movie, he switches over to Magneto's side, facing off against Bobby. And in the comics, Simon Lasker makes his first appearance as Pyro in X-Men Gold, Volume 2, Issue 1, when Mesmero tricks him into believing he's Charles Xavier, and he joins the Brotherhood of Evil Mutants. So not good on screen, not good in the comic books. Still a cool character, just likes to dip into the dark side.